Oh, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Leading Age Colorado. Thank you for having us and inviting us to present today. We're excited to share the results of our COVID-19 sentiment survey that we did during the height of the pandemic. My name is Dana Wolschlager, and I'm a partner and practice leader for Plant Moran Living Forward. We're headquartered out of Chicago, and we provide full service development advisory services to clients all over the country that are looking to develop, expand, or reposition any of their campuses. I'd like to introduce you to my friend Bobby Sumner.
Thank you, Dana. My name is Bobby Sumner. You see, I have a mask with my name on it, which is one thing that we've encouraged all of our communities to do. When you wear your mask, you really can't see the smile. And we encourage everybody to do that so they can call each other by name. Retirement Dynamics is headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. The company is 20 years old, and I've been in the industry 38 years. We provide marketing, research, and sales consulting to the senior living industry throughout the United States. It's been a real honor and pleasure to work with Dana and Shauna on this presentation. I'll turn it over to Shauna.
Hello, my name is Shauna Schmal. I'm with Ebenezer Management Services, located in Edina, Minnesota. We're a senior living provider that provides services throughout the upper Midwest and specialize in senior housing cooperatives. We manage over 50 housing cooperatives in the upper Midwest, as well as relaunching back into the development market of cooperatives as well. I spent 20 years in the cooperative industry in marketing, sales, member relations, and absolutely love the concept, very passionate about the lifestyle. They're member-owned communities. And so it was a real honor to be a part of this survey. We had 17 or 33% of our managed cooperatives participate in this survey with Retirement Dynamics and Plant Moran, and came up with some really great data and great information. As we know, this last year has been very challenging. So if you are in need of a few creative new ideas, you've got the team right here to lend a helping hand. So honored to be here.
Thank you, Shauna. And so we will go through the results of the survey, very high level, and then we will talk about and explore some proven practices and innovative ideas from a marketing and sales perspective that we're hopeful you'll be able to take back to your communities. As we're coming out of the pandemic, fingers double crossed, we know that you want to start refilling your communities, and we're hoping that some of this will provide you with information that can do just that. If you have not had an opportunity to read the report, it is chock full of fantastic information, about 100 pages worth of data. And if you download this presentation and you click on the link right here, it will take you to the website where you can download the full report. So feel free to go ahead and do that. I also want to make sure that we recognize the sponsors that helped made this this survey and report possible. We were fortunate enough to raise some funds to help cover the cost of the research, which was intensive. And you can see our sponsors here. Plant Moran Living Forward, Retirement Dynamics were the premier sponsors, and then fantastic partners through RLPS, Peric, HJ Sims, Unidyne, Point Click Care, Connected Living, Perkins Eastman, Pearl Creek Advisors, SFCS Architects, and HDG Healthcare supported as well with their contributions. So let's talk a second about the why behind the survey. But our motivation was really to provide a platform for older adults to have a voice and to share what their experience was like. We believed that the results of the survey would demonstrate how glad older adults were to be living in a senior living community, as opposed to the media narrative that paints all senior living in a very negative light. We also believe that there was an opportunity for staff and the frontline heroes to share what they experienced during the senior living community, working in a senior living community amidst a pandemic, and really to give them an opportunity to validate that they too felt safe in spite of the risks associated with caring for older adults. We wanted to hear directly from older adults who were still living in their own homes, but were considering moving to a senior living community while this pandemic, and whether this pandemic had changed their perception of senior living or change their minds about moving to a senior living community. And then lastly, we wanted to know if residents and prospects felt socially isolated during the pandemic. Let me just touch briefly on the methodology. We distributed just a little under 24,000 surveys to senior living communities, residents, their prospects, and their staff. This was to all independent living organizations or independent living senior communities. We did not do assisted living, memory care, or long-term care. So the surveys were out there for from June 22nd of 2020 in the midst of the pandemic through July 6th of 2020. Those were the digital surveys. The paper surveys were in the field from June 22nd, 2020 to July 23rd of 2020. We had responses from just a little over 5,000 individuals, residents, prospects, and staff, and which represented more than 21% of a response rate. We surveyed 13 organizations that participated in the survey, which resulted in about 70 senior living buildings or communities. And we have representation from 13 states. The largest proportion of responses came from entrance fee life plan communities, followed by the unique senior living option cooperatives. And for those of you that don't know what a cooperative is, it is an ownership model of age restricted senior living and really is increasingly favored by older adults and very specifically some younger older adults. 16 of the communities were from organizations that offered both rental and an entrance fee option on the same campus. And then the balance were either straight rental apartments or rental cottage options. As I mentioned before, we had a 21% response rate. We had a 40% response rate for members or residents in terms of their response. Prospects represented about 2.2%, and then the staff response rate was about 20%. And so this really told us that people wanted to have a voice and they really wanted to be heard. You can see that the bulk of the providers that participated in the survey really were from the Great Lakes region. We also had Florida and South Carolina. The demographic of the residents that participated, so the average age really was consistent with industry standards in that the average age is 81 for females and 82 for males. The prospects on average were younger than the resident respondents by a minimum of 5 years. Really, for me, demonstrating that we need to start focusing on that younger, older adult from a marketing perspective and starting to develop that relationship sooner. More than 65% of the prospects respondents were married, with only 54% of the 65 choosing to answer the survey as a couple, suggesting that nearly 18% of married prospect couples have materially different opinions on senior living, which is interesting. And for us, this might signal a more challenging sales environment wherein community sales personnel must really persuade both spouses, where they might have disparate demands, and the community, just proving that the community is the right fit for both individuals as opposed to just one. I'm just going to quickly go through the executive summary here. As you can imagine, the amount of data that was collected was significant. And the report, like I said, is over 100 pages, rich with useful information. As such, we tried to really break down the results in a way that was meaningful to the industry and that would allow providers to leverage the data in areas that were most important and by department. The results are broken down by residents, prospects, and staff. And then we focused on breaking the data down by specific segments, including residency, the challenge associated with social isolation, safety, staff, communication, technology, dining, and lifestyle. And then from there, we viewed the results through the lens of operations, which obviously is very critical, but equally as important, we viewed it through the lens of marketing and sales. So developing the report in this way, in our opinion, allowed providers and their team members to focus on their areas of expertise. So their marketing team can key in on critical marketing solutions, the IT folks can focus on technology, and not be flipping around trying to find the right answers. This page is a pretty simple executive summary. And the full results obviously go into much more detail, but the results were really pretty positive. 86% of the residents were glad that they moved to a senior living community. 3/4 of them were glad to be living in a community during the pandemic. 93% of the residents, nearly 3,000 in total, felt that the community took all the precautions to keep them safe. 85% of staff agreed that the residents are safer in a community than in their previous homes. 92% of staff believe the community responded very well to the pandemic, and 90% were glad to be working for a senior living community. This is all fantastic news. And lastly, and potentially one of the more important takeaways, at least in my opinion, was that 74% of the prospects said that their time frame for moving had not changed as a result of the pandemic. This gets into a little bit more detail, but let me focus on some of the key takeaways. So first of all, we need as an industry to have a much greater emphasis and focus on technology. It was abundantly clear to us that it was critically important in terms of communication to family and the communication of the technology infrastructure and plans to staff. So that was very important that we had that. We also recognized that during trying times, some of the low marks that we received were tied to activities and recreation and food. Food obviously is very, very important to our residents, and residents generally gave communities low marks for variety and quality of food and meal options. But it's real tough to get, creative when you're dropping meals off at a resident's door. But they did provide us with some really good feedback. And then they really wanted us to focus on how to better educate the industry about the value proposition that senior living provides. So there's tremendous examples of that in the full report. As it relates to marketing, access to and or education of technology should be an ongoing focus of communities to increase connectivity for residents. 89% of the prospects felt strongly that they were able to leverage technology to maintain connectivity with family and friends during the shelter in place. Prospective residents have adapted to and wholeheartedly embraced technology, and they're not going to want to go back to something less in your community than they otherwise had in their own homes. So we absolutely need to embrace that. Secondly, as an industry, I think we need to do a better job educating the consumer, again, as I said, of the value proposition that senior living has to offer. For example, understanding, and we did document some of the fears that prospects had during this pandemic. And if you review some of those, it'll allow you to identify some unique ways to connect with them, to nurture the relationship. Specific to dining, as an example, 60% of the prospects felt fearful about going shopping and really were overwhelmed by the additional meal menu planning and prep and cooking. So is this a potential opportunity for outreach by offering to deliver meals or include them in the weekly shopping that your organization does for the residents on campus? So I think there's some creative ideas that can come out of this report that can help you nurture relationships from a marketing perspective, as well as enhance the experience for your existing residents. This was the breakdown specific to the prospect participation. We had about a 17, almost 18% response rate for those individuals that were on a wait list. About a 2% response rate for those that were just prospects, but not necessarily on a wait list. This demonstrates the food supplies during quarantine and prospect participation. Again, this goes back to their fear about going shopping during the stay-at-home order. For the most part, they had plenty of food during their time at home, and they had household supplies. But when they were running short of those things, they were worried about having to go out to the store. So how could we potentially help them through outreach? Lastly, and I know both Shauna and Bobby will talk about this, we also wanted to understand very specifically if the pandemic had changed the minds of prospects in terms of their desire to move into senior living and specifically the time frame. So nearly 70% of the prospects still wanted to move within the next 3 years. And you need to ask yourself, who are those people on your waiting list? That is the target you need to go after. And then 74% of them said that their time frame had not changed. So that's a significant number of individuals that are still that still have a willingness to want to move into our communities. Lastly, this slide demonstrates the prospect's interest to move by age and community type. And you can see here that life plan community prospects or CCRC entrance fee community prospects for women are between the ages of, let's say, 75 and 76. Those CCRCs that are rental options and or entrance fees, the women were about 2 years older and men about 1 year, 1.5 years older. Those that were living in a cottage type product were a little bit younger, so 74.3 years to 76, pretty similar to a traditional entrance fee. And then the rental prospects that were on a waiting list or interested in a community were 76.3 to 79 years of age. So this was the population that was actually the oldest on the prospect or wait list. Interestingly enough, the cooperative product is attracting a much younger population, probably why Shauna and Ebenezer have such great success with their cooperatives. So the average age of the prospects on their wait lists or individuals that they're engaged with for women is 72, and for men, 72.8. So they're a much younger cohort, and they're developing those relationships with that population who are interested in co-ops much earlier than we are in other senior living products. So I'm going to turn this over to Bobby now to take all of that information and talk about how you're leveraging it through some of your marketing and sales strategies, Bobby.
Okay, great. Dana, thank you so much. Looking at the marketing and sales strategies during or pre-pandemic, during and post-pandemic, and just want to hit on a couple of things. The results in the survey came from the middle of the pandemic. But now we have the question, okay, post-COVID-19, what are the communities doing now? So the marketing sales strategies, Dana went over these. I'm not going to bore you with those details. Look at the second bullet, time frame to move. I found interesting that 25% of the prospects said the COVID-19 pandemic shortened their time frame to move to a community. And that's one of the reasons we say mine your database for diamonds, call the people, find out who the 25% are who are ready to move. And 74% said that their time frame to move had been unchanged. So call those people. So improvements needed. As Dana said, the residents generally gave low marks for alternative recreation activities. I think we learned a lot. Dining gave low marks because the communities really were having to react to something they'd never reacted to. Look at the fear of congregate living. Prospect write-ins noted a significant amount of fear related to congregate living and how the community would suppress their freedom in choosing how to respond to risk. And as Dana was talking earlier, we heard a lot of negative news about senior living communities, and most of those focused on the assisted living and nursing care, which experienced most of the deaths. And there was the quarantine, and there still is quarantining, and the residents are concerned about that. They're feeling better, but so are the prospects. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have this survey is to what's the messaging? How have we changed the narrative? Not to trick people, but so we can be more honest and determine what's our value proposition. So marketing sales strategy during the pandemic, I love this. And some communities responded well and others didn't. Low sales diagnosis, this is a chart that Retirement Dynamics put together. There are about 46 to 47 combinations of why you may be experiencing low sales. And if you look at the bottom left, it says low sales. Either one, you're not closing, or you have too few presentations. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I encourage you, organizations, the communities, take a look at that. It's a great site, self-diagnosis for the sales staff, as well as for the marketing and sales department, to try to locate, if we're not getting the number of sales we need, why, what's the reason? And on the bottom, on the right-hand side, it says, don't burn new leads using outdated sales techniques and questions. And Sean is going to talk a lot more about the sales aspect in just a minute. And so improving occupancy, you know, we talked earlier, Dana did, I spoke about what's the new value proposition? You know, we all have to come up with the right answer and the truthful answer to what did your residents do during quarantine? How did they react? And they were isolated, but the prospects were also isolated. Dana pointed that out earlier. In terms of questions, we always say you should have a commitment objective before every phone call and every presentation. And a commitment objective is something you want the prospect to agree to before you make that call, before you have the presentation. And on the marketing sales staff, just a few more. Send an internal email to all staff with the names of the visitors and the time of the visitors. Make sure they're greeted in the lobby. Be sure to wear a mask and you have a mask for your guests. Make sure you have your name on it. Introduce, if you can, the executive director, the president, CEO. Find out if they'd like to have something to eat or drink. But as you go throughout the community and on a tour, and by the way, communities are touring now, make sure all the staff have a 15-second infomercial that they can tell how long they've been, explain how long they've been in the community, what they do, why are they there. And then when they leave, don't let your guests leave and walk to the car by themselves. Walk them to their automobile and then follow up within 48 hours. And now we get to I think one of the easiest things we can do to set our communities apart is to increase our customer service, hospitality, and our etiquette during this post-pandemic. So one of the suggestions is for the housekeeping and maintenance staff, give every one of them a business card. Give the servers in the dining room a business card with their name on it. Make sure they always wear the appropriate PPE. They can share how long they've worked at the community. They can always smile and introduce themselves, call the guests by name, call the residents by name. You know, wouldn't it be great, and Ms. Jones, I understand that you have the Smiths here for dinner. We're delighted to have you here, and we hope you enjoy your time. And also just to thank everyone by name, okay? So examples of hospitality: answer the phone with a sense of joy and optimism. The worst, the biggest killer of sales and leads is not having a good person answer the phone first. They're the most important person in the whole community. Have a sense of joy and excitement about the community. Invite residents to encourage other residents to have meals with them. When a director meets a new resident, present them with a gift from the department. Make it special. Invite residents to join new residents. Invite staff to join new staff. Have a sense of joy and excitement about your community. Okay. And I'm finishing up on the summary of 10 recent life plan communities, and I think you'll find this interesting. We asked them several questions, and how did COVID-19 affect occupancy negatively in your community? 8 out of 10 said yes. In the past 30 days, have there been an increase in occupancy? 9 out of 10 said yes. One community was 12 sold and occupied apartments away from tripping their bond covenants. And in 30 days, they got 12 move-ins and made it. 10 out of 10 were still wearing masks. 10 out of 10, they've seen a substantial increase in new leads. The willingness of prospects to come in for in-person visits, 10 out of 10. I'm presently in New York State, and we're going to have an event tomorrow. We have 37 people that are coming. We have another event 2 weeks from now, and about 30 folks are coming. So people want to get out. They want to enjoy one another. Planning to hold in-person events 5 out of 10 communities. Residents and staff feel much safer now, 10 out of 10. And you can tell this to your prospects. Open up dining, 8 out of 10. Do residents feel isolated? Only 2 out of 10 communities. Wellness checks, yes, but the most important, goes back to what Dana was saying earlier. Improved technology, only 3 out of 10 communities indicated they had improved their technology during the COVID experience, which is a huge component that we need to work on, especially as we're coming out of COVID, and maybe who knows what the next crisis will be. Okay. Okay, you turn it over to Shona. Thank you.
Hey, very good. Thank you, Bobby. So just to share with you, why was it important for our organization to participate in such survey pertaining to COVID-19? As you all know, we've all experienced very challenging and trying times this last year, and we really felt it was important, first and foremost, just to hear and listen from our resident members, the prospects that were on our waiting list, as well as staff, to understand the different perspectives and to discover any misperceptions or assumptions, as Dana mentioned earlier, that we may have in order to adjust, make changes during these changing times, as we've all been doing through COVID-19. Also to discover the members' perspectives as it pertains to living in their community versus when they were living in their home, in a single dwelling unit versus the community lifestyle, their experience. To learn how our members felt, as was one of the goals of the survey during the pandemic, with regards to isolation and the community living, communication, how we communicated the different protocols and daily changes through COVID-19, if that was effective or ways that we could improve. And then also overall to learn in order to continue to market our communities and to share with prospective members what we learned through the survey in order to build confidence in living in the cooperative environment. One, first and foremost, just wanted to mention the 93 percentile that communities stated that they felt that we took all the safety precautions in place, as well as 61% of our member residents felt safer in the community versus their previous home. This was quite surprising in the sense that we potentially felt that that prospects would have felt safer in their home because of not being in a congregate living environment. So that was a real eye-awakening result for us. And we actually leveraged that data in our correspondence through communicating with prospects and advertising medias. We also implemented the changing protocols that we learned through. We have a connection with mHealth Fairview hospitals, which gave great protocols on the ever-changing data daily through COVID, through multiple forms of flyers and memos and emails. So the members felt safe and they felt very aware of what was happening and what was changing from day to day. The support from staff, managers, our maintenance and housekeeping, and cooperatives are a little bit of a different living environment in the sense that, as Dana mentioned earlier, they are member owned versus third party owned. So the overall decisions regarding policies and procedures and protocols are actually made by a board of directors. So many of our co-ops formed COVID committees. They took the information that was gathered and learned from Ebenezer management leadership and the learnings that we had from mHealth and Fairview to implement their protocols and processes and procedures. So every co-op was handled and the situation a little bit differently. So a little different than a third-party owned facility. The actual co-op communities overall have always had a sense of really being like a family, but this COVID experience really increased that that family experience, neighbors helping neighbors, people looking out for one another. And then the main reason was really to experience and to compare, again, what it's like living in a cooperative community versus a single dwelling. And prospects didn't have that experience of living in a community. So that was interesting data regarding those percentages. And then I'm just, for the last two bullets, I'm going to share throughout the presentation some of the creative ways that we've made changes, as well as some of the information that we've learned from the survey and throughout the COVID experience. So first and foremost, we want to embrace change, but also felt this time during COVID really helped us go back to remembering the basics. Many times people get busy and are in the process of giving tours and selling a high number of prospects as well as tours. So by eliminating that, this gave more time to really sit down and do that discovery and get to know the prospects on a deeper level. So I had many of our salespeople mention that this was a great learning curve, again, to go back to those basics and really design questions, as Bobby had mentioned, around the present day circumstances. So some of the general guidelines for clarifying people's circumstances are really understanding their why, their when, and their circumstances. What are their needs? What's their current living situation? What are their desires and preferences and fears? So in order to gather that information, a very high level of trust needs to be built, and that takes time. One of the aspects of co-op development, and I'll be sharing from a management perspective for our managed co-ops, as well as from a development perspective, for those of you who may be in a new development project. For cooperatives, we are required to have 60% of our homes pre-sold in order to start construction. So for the majority of my career, the time has really been spent with buyer or prospect focused, building relationships and really getting to know the prospect and the member, as well as educating them on what the concept is, as we didn't have a building to tour. So in a way, the COVID experience for me has been, and for those of in the co-op development industry, has been an extension of really what we have been doing, because we did not have a product to show. So again, clarifying their circumstance, the financial qualification, their timing, their decision makers, and then being aware of the personality styles of the people that you're meeting with. Are they an analytical person? So you need to approach that person differently than you would an educator or somebody who is more of an emotional personality, or a driver. And I'll get into some examples with that. The challenging part is when you have a spouse who's an analytical and another spouse who is an emotional prospect. So there you have to be very flexible. So we'll change to the next slide. So giving you some examples of open-ended and closed-ended questions that you can really take and customize for your community and for your personality as a salesperson. But in the times through COVID, people really have been in need of a listening ear now more than ever. And a great time to really build that deeper level of trust by empathizing and listening and paraphrasing and understanding where they're coming from. And all that process really builds trust when it's done in a very caring and genuine way. So these are just some examples of starting open-ended questions to help them share more than just 1 or 2 sentences. So one of my favorites is, tell me a little bit more about what you're thinking or what you're feeling or what you're looking for. You know, what are your thoughts? So lots of different examples where you can really customize some open-ended questions to meet your individual situation. And then closed questions are really more to discover or gather information or to create conversation. Have you considered this or that? Do you currently need help in your current home with outside maintenance? What types of things are you doing? Who is involved in your decision-making process? When you're working with the younger, older, senior, I always ask that question, as members of a co-op in the early 70s typically like to make their own decision, and some choose not to involve their their children, and some do. So really clarifying that and asking for their family members' information if they're willing to share that with you so you can involve those decision makers. And then confirming questions or clarifying questions. Again, asking, what maybe you've just explained, does it make sense to them? How do they feel about what you've shared? A lot of good options for clarifying questions that, again, you can customize. And then when it comes to, as you've built that relationship and you've gone through that journey, for those of you that have a longer sales cycle, our process is sometimes 9 months of a reservation phase in cooperative development before they actually make the commitment to subscribe or to purchase. And some of you that's shorter, maybe 30 days for those of you that have a shorter sales cycle. So important, again, to know who your buyer is and what their personality is, and ask questions accordingly. So for somebody who maybe have a more direct personality, and you've done your due diligence with building trust and discovery and built that relationship to that point of asking for them to make that commitment, those types of people you would maybe want to approach in a more straightforward manner. And again, every situation will be unique and different according to that prospect and the relationship that's built. For those that have a more emotional personality, a narrative response involving a third-party story or telling a brief story of your own that relates to their current situation or maybe some of the fears or obstacles that they are experiencing. And then, yes, always following up with a personal touch, sending a personal note, something meaningful to the individual that you just spent time with and got to know with, something that's unique and pertains to who they are as a person. So marketing solutions with building a team, and I just so strongly believe in creating a very supportive and trusting environment. As we all know, we're sometimes much harder than ourselves than we are on others. So to build that level of trust with your team, as we build the trust with our prospects by encouraging one another, creating an environment of transparency. When you're really struggling or having a challenging day, can you go to your team lead and say, I really need some help here? Because as we all know, with sales, we've got highs and we've got lows. I did have a mentor of mine in my early sales days that said to me, remember, don't let your highs get too high and your lows get too low. And that really helped me get through some really difficult days in times when we have challenge. And then remember, each salesperson has an individual personality of their own. So one person's sales approach may not work because they have a different personality and they need a different approach. So I've learned over the years to help that individual salesperson create tools that work for them. And then accountability, helping people with making those follow-up phone calls and how you doing today, sharing creative ideas, and most importantly, having fun and enjoy the journey, even in challenging times. We will look back and see the benefit and how we've grown through the most difficult days. With creative sales solutions with technology, as both Dana and Bobby had mentioned, as we are with Ebenezer re-entering the development market and looking at new technologies for launching a new development brand of cooperatives, we've found a lot of great new tools out there that we can tap into and to utilize. And these are just a few that you can research on your own. And there are many others along the same lines that you can research as well. But finding out your web provider, are they really strong in Google Analytics and what's going on in the back end of your website? We've had to make a lot of changes in today's world with people coming to our website versus coming to our door for a tour. So really updating that website on the back end, as well as adding more information on the front end. So looking at online strategies with that is really important. And there are web providers that provide such specialties and those that you can contract with to gain information on that. Further is a virtual sales assistant for those prospects who do involve their family members is a great tool. They can get some answers 24/7 in their busy schedules by having an online chat. I did ask some detailed questions. Can you customize your questions or your answers? Because there's nothing more frustrating when you ask a question and it doesn't really answer what you've asked, as well as making sure that you have a statement of availability so it doesn't seem informal. And that is something that can be done through such service there. Another app that you may all be familiar with is One Day, where you can take a video and upload it into a very professional format and send that to a prospect and or their family. This was one of the most exciting foundings for myself in development, as I've been marketing cooperatives without a product to show for a number of years. There's a number of companies now that provide 3D animated virtual tours, and they can base those off your construction specifications. So for those of you that are in development, it's a great tool, and it looks so real, almost like a Hollywood movie per se. So take a look at some of those examples and check it out, because there's some great tools out there that have improved over the last number of years for selling without something to see. And with communication, as the percentages Dana mentioned were very low, we have a new system that is called Cavo that I've become aware of, and I know there are other apps and tools along these same lines, but we are looking at this potential product that partners with Afterworld. Afterworld is a provider who installs wonderful communication systems. A number of our cooperatives have the communication tools through televised information platforms with regards to management updates, happenings for the day, such as activities or social gatherings, board meetings per se, that can be televised right in onto the members' television. This new program, Cavo, actually is a remote control with a box that attaches to the television with a number of USB ports. So all the remote controls can be accessed through one remote versus multiple remotes. This can be uploaded or downloaded to a family member's phone through an app, so the family member can communicate with the member through their television, whether it's through live chat, just conversations with family and grandkids. One member shared with me that they actually took their phone to a grandson's t-ball game, put it on a tripod, and grandma and grandpa could watch their grandson's t-ball game on their television. So I really think these are going to be more and more creative ways and tools we're going to want to implement to embrace new technology. Other ways this can be utilized: you can upload family photos. They can be rotated on the member's television. And committee meetings, board meetings. You can create small groups to host book clubs, any kind of social activities right on your television. And then again, if you have a family member that may have trouble using their remote to get a sporting event, as a family member, you can log in and help them find that channel. So an amazing tool that we are researching. So feel free to Google those and research those on your own. There are both national companies there, as well as many others to help with new technology and new communications or way of communicating. So old ways won't open new doors. So trends, I wanted to share just a little bit about some new building design trends. And maybe for those of you who have buildings, you're rethinking the use of space. As we are looking at developing, we've been, implementing different creative ideas due to the COVID story of this last year, possibly adding a family room that has a separate entrance, a meeting area where families could gather for small family functions with that privacy as well as safety. Looking at a package delivery room with a separate entrance where members could have Amazon drop-off deliveries or food deliveries, even considering a cooling unit or a warming unit for food to be delivered, whether it's through Grubhub or one community had one grocery store that the community worked with and delivered food for their community members. And you'd have to think through the process of delivery. A lot of co-op members love helping each other, so they would potentially help deliver those packages to homes as well for members who are in need. Use of the outdoor space, adding more outdoor lawn space for leisure activities with family, friends, pickleball courts, lots of outdoor space, looking at different ways of utilizing that for gatherings in the outdoors. Looking at larger common spaces for that social distancing aspect, or again, modifying use of space for combined use. Looking at more storage areas. We've learned as we've had to remove tables and chairs to allow for social distancing, there's a need for more storage. Potential antimicrobial finishes on door handles and grab bars or handrails, touchless finishes in order to eliminate that transfer of even other maybe the flu virus or other types of spread disease will really help the community feel safe and know that you're taking that level of concern and care for health and for safety. Potentially more hand washing stations, looking at your HVAC systems and high-tech filters, increasing lighting and more natural light in the communities from a design standpoint. And then again, some more creative ideas, more than Bobby had shared a number for building relationships, building community. I think we will be taking a lot of what we've learned during COVID, and it'll continue into the future as we continue to meet. Maybe giving the option for members to engage virtually on different occasions, or if you're hosting informational meetings, having that virtual option. Bobby mentioned wearing a mask with your name on it. I've attended a number of different webinars, and one idea that came forth was wearing a button with your photo. So prospects can really see your face and see your smile, not just with your eyes. One of the things I think is really important is to really continue to ask the prospect what is most important and what is comfortable to them from a communication standpoint. Do they prefer a one-on-one call? Back to the basics. Would they prefer a one-on-one visit, a one-on-one Zoom meeting with themselves or with their family, a home visit, meeting in a coffee shop? Asking what's most comfortable for you. And as Dana mentioned, some of our prospects are very comfortable with tech and some may not be. 80% felt comfortable completing the survey online that we provided. So consider providing Zoom tutorials along with a one-page training, simple 1, 2, 3 step-by-step how to get Zoom set up on your computer, or recruit younger volunteer students to help virtually to assist with training. Sometimes it's very intimidating and so they avoid it. If there's ways we can help them feel comfortable getting engaged virtually and online. A number of our cooperatives got very, very creative during COVID. One co-op community actually had 5 virtual social gatherings a week with bringing in special guest speakers and happy hours, coffee groups, all kinds of different activities took place online. They really embraced hosting their board meetings and their committee meetings. Took a little bit of time for some, but they really did embrace that change. Also, with the isolation, an idea came up of really creating a small group setting. More people feel comfortable in a smaller group, maybe than in a larger group, engaging in conversation to eliminate some of that feeling of isolation. So all of our buildings typically have a wing and a floor. So we had, the first floor east wing formed a neighborhood group and got together for coffee 9 o'clock in the morning, and that small group engaged in conversation. Some of them actually met in the great room and had it televised through their communication system, so members could engage in that way. Lots of online games came about through trivia. There's one tool called Play Bridge, trickstercards.com. So members were engaging in virtual games as well. One of our communities actually held bingo in the lower level parking area. So again, lots of creativity, outdoor events. They had concerts in the parking lot, sing-alongs on the decks. You could do outdoor yoga, outdoor games, and some actually had box lunch picnics as well. And then invite engaging prospects to continue to build community, utilizing your virtual online presence with inviting those prospects to engage. Sometimes it's in a small group and sometimes it's in a large group setting too. And having those options, even though we are able to gather in person again slowly as we are doing into the future. So lastly, as we know, sales go up and sales go down, but service stays forever. And in times when we've had members who've gone through that journey with us and still made the decision to not move forward yet, I still stay engaged and send them a personal note thanking them. We're here for you when your time is ready. And more often than not, they'll come back around. I had one situation in one of our communities in Iowa where the member signed up and backed out a number of times and eventually came back around and joined through that connection. And she came up to me at a grand opening and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Mm-hmm. She goes, "I absolutely love it here. And I've met so many friends. And I'm now traveling with 2 other friends and my husband." So my encouragement is to don't give up, stay connected, even when you get a no, because you'll get far more yeses in the long run.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for participating in this session. We're looking forward to seeing you in person next year. Have a great day.